Sports Illustrated, Others Receiving Votes podcast, the streaming college football playoff version. I'm Pat Forde, joined with Bryan Fischer from SI. Gene Wojciechowski's off getting a pedicure, doing important academic things, but we're going to handle this ourselves. And Bryan, we've made it to the first rankings here. You ready?
I'm ready to get angry over nothing. As we usually do this time of year, and I think it's good that Gino's not here. I mean, Tennessee, after that loss to Oklahoma over the weekend, I think it's easy to kind of push off his old alma mater that and at the game that he was at. And, it's going to be an interesting, I think, playoff committee rankings this week because we don't have any data. And I think that's the big thing that we kind of get. We get our first glimpse of what the committee's actually thinking. And while it might not matter at the end of the day, and certainly not by the time there's actual results on the field for them to select on Selection Sunday, I'm excited to see kind of what the committee is valuing going into today.
Yeah, that's always a little bit that's the reveal as much as anything is where are their minds. What have they been paying attention to? What are the metrics or non-metrics that count? And, where everybody stands after 3/4 of the way or 2/3 of the way through the season, at least. Some teams a little more than that, some teams 3/4. So we'll see where they're at. Things will change, absolutely, over the course of the next 5 weeks hereafter. But we'll get a good glimpse at the committee's thinking about who they want to put into this 12-team playoff. We'll get the whole preamble coming up here from Reese Davis and Booger McFarland, Joey Galloway, Greg McElroy, and we'll be commenting as we go. We want your questions. If you guys can send them in, we will try to put them in the chat here and answer them as we go along through this thing. Bryan and I will just give some general reactions to the rankings as they come in. And then at the end, we will try to sort it out, decide who we're mad at. I am sure we'll be mad at somebody. I'm already mad before I've even seen any of the picks because we've been doing this dance for, 11 years now, and there's always something that seems to be a little bit curious. So, all right, we're looking at Reese Davis now. We're looking at little Mario Cristobal.
Pat, I'm going to be curious which of the commissioners is going to be most upset. Which commissioner is going to have some statements come Saturday? About these rankings, about strength of schedule. That was a big thing this summer that I think everybody forgets going into this is there were some tweaks in terms of schedule and strength of schedule metrics. So what the actual committee is evaluating, that has changed slightly. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference, but this is kind of our first glimpse at that. And I'm going to be very curious, as much as the fans, as much as us in the media might get upset over these rankings or which team is above this team. I'm going to be very curious, especially on a weekend where, let's face it, there's not a whole lot of huge matchups. Which of those commissioners is going to come out a little bit fired up as well?
Yeah, it's a good point. That's usually when we start hearing from them lobbying and politicking for their teams. Occasionally, especially when we get later into the process, they'll start sending out messages the night of the rankings. But for now, I think you're right that Saturday, when they're out watching games, you're going to be in Lubbock, right, for BYU Texas Tech. Brett Yormark will be there. Where does the Big 12 land, and what does he think about where the Big 12 is? So I'm sure you can expect some comments there.
Yeah, I think the Big 12 versus ACC and which one of those might be a multi-bid league is probably going to be the story of these next couple of weeks. That jockeying between the two. I think it's pretty much set in terms of the Big 10 and what their contenders are, and we'll certainly see in these next couple of weeks if maybe USC or Washington kind of throw their ring in that their name into the hat there. But to me, I think that's going to be the big storyline these next couple of weeks. Which one could get a second team in there, assuming Notre Dame is certainly going to win out and be there at 10-2 and maybe even be in the field too. That would be the other kind of factor I think in these initial rankings. What does the committee value in terms of that Notre Dame resume? I think if you and we've both seen them up close in person. Eye test, I think they would certainly pass that eye test if you're given that if you're the committee. Resume wise, though, how's that going to stack up? That's going to be something to keep an eye on this tonight for sure.
For sure, yes, and that there's just going to be a lot learned here as we dive into this. The Big 12 had a great record head to head against the ACC. They brought that up often. In the weeks of the season when they were playing each other early. And I think you will hear that continue to be echoed, especially if it looks like the Big 12 is not in as advantageous a position as they want to be for that second bid. So those two jockeying. I'm not very sympathetic as of right now to a fourth Big Ten team. I think that they haven't really done enough to prove it. In the non-conference, Iowa lost to Iowa State. Michigan lost to Oklahoma. USC lost to Notre Dame. The main contenders for that fourth spot all have losses when the non-conference that I think hurt them. SEC, we've got a ton of contenders, but we don't know for sure what the ordering is going to be because we've got a bunch of teams kind of stacked in there. We have the one-loss teams, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and how do those sort out? We have A&M that's probably ahead of all of them at undefeated, but Alabama beat Georgia, but Georgia beat Mississippi. But Alabama also has a bad loss, if you look at it, to Florida State. That loss is getting worse. And what's the factor there? Is that hold them back? They have a lot of great wins, but they also have a bad loss.
I will say that's the difference. This in terms of the playoff rankings, they do tend to excuse those bad losses, but they do almost overvalue those big wins.
Yeah. So that, and that's the kind of thing where each committee may be a little bit different of what's the value of good wins versus bad losses. And yeah, so it's some of those excused, especially maybe if they happen in the first week of the season, or if you're Oklahoma, it wasn't even a bad loss because Texas is a pretty good team, but John Mateer was just coming back from a hand injury. So what's the excusability, I guess, of a 23-6 Red River loss when your quarterback and you're extremely key to that offense maybe wasn't at 100%. These are the kind of things we'll see how much the committee's factoring in.
Well, and our first biggest surprise is they are releasing the bottom from 21 to 25. I think seeing Washington there at number 23 and Pitt into the rankings, which they are not in the AP top 25 as well.
Your feed is ahead of mine because I am not getting that yet. Tell me what you got.
All right. Looks like we got number 21, Michigan, number 22, Missouri, number 23, Washington, number 24, Pitt, and number 25, Tennessee.
Okay. Interesting there. Yeah. All right. So two SEC teams in there, an ACC and two Big Ten. And fascinating there, just think Pittsburgh to me is one to keep your eye on. They've still got a chance to upset some apple carts. They play Miami and they play Notre Dame, so they could vault up. Their loss to West Virginia is a bad loss. But okay, here we go. I'm caught up now. Do we have number 20 Iowa?
Number 20 Iowa, yeah.
Okay.
Which hosts Oregon this week, a big one there on Saturday, and that is certainly a place we talk about Oregon. That is a difficult place to play. I think a lot of the metrics would say that it's going to be a closer game. It's supposed to be rainy too there in Iowa City, so that's going to be a very big one for not only the Big Ten jockeying in terms of the positioning, but I think to have another marquee victory on the slate, another top 25 win for Oregon, that's going to be big. I think in the eyes of the committee.
Yeah, I've seen some good teams go to die in Iowa City, so Oregon probably should be on upset watch in that game. Iowa's great defense. We'll see about the offense. USC at number 19. We're stacking up the Big Ten teams here. 23 Washington, 21 Michigan, 20 Iowa, 19 USC. So all of the fourth place contenders, if you will, are in the top 25. Not that high, but they're in. The U, wow, all the way down at 18. I'm a little surprised at that. What do you think, Brian?
That might be the biggest surprise. I think if you looked at certainly those first couple of games, now I think maybe this is recency bias. This is the first committee meeting there right after getting the upset in overtime to SMU. Really you have the Louisville loss as well in there. So maybe it's a bit of recency bias, especially, right one spot behind Georgia Tech. I don't think that's good news for the ACC in terms of gut reaction, seeing 17 Georgia Tech, number 18 Miami. That spells trouble for Jim Phillips and company.
Sure does. Yeah, I thought both those teams would probably be top 15. So that might say they're not valuing the rest of the ACC very much. We'll see where Louisville and Virginia are, obviously. And who the heck are these teams that are going to be? Okay, Vanderbilt at 16. All right.
Louisville at number 15 as well, which I think is certainly much higher than I think maybe the general consensus might be coming in today.
That's fascinating. Louisville at 15. Oh boy, we're going to have some discussions here. Because clearly Louisville's going to be behind Notre Dame, and I would like someone to explain to me why Louisville's behind Notre Dame. Virginia 14. Holy cow. They have nobody from the ACC in the top 13.
And no group of 5 teams either in the top. You would have thought maybe Memphis could have snuck in there as well. And then our first Big 12 team at Utah as well at number 13. So that seems pretty clear that the committee is valuing the Big 12 well above the ACC right now.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Wow. And yes, no Memphis, nobody from the American. The Americans had a good season, but they're not getting any credit for it yet. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, you look at number 25 Tennessee there, the Vols, I think that near loss, near win, if you will, to Georgia, doing a lot of work for the Vols there, because in terms of the actual wins that they have, not anywhere close to even what USF has. They're even a head-to-head. Compare with Arkansas as well.
Yeah, that's very surprising to me. I mean, USF, which beat Florida in Gainesville, which drummed Boise State, and one of their 2 losses are to Memphis and to Miami. Oklahoma in at 12. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean they're in the field of 12, though, because we still have to factor in an ACC champion and a group of 6 champions. So at this point, Oklahoma is 2 spots out of the field.
Exactly, and right behind Texas.
Which,
okay. There was certainly some polls early, even after that loss that Texas had had the Longhorns behind the Sooners. But glad the committee rectifies that. And that's the thing. If you go through that mock selection exercise, you do put those 2 teams up, and you can change that order a little bit. If a team has that head-to-head, which obviously they are treating nicely there based on that game at the Cotton Bowl.
Tell you what, Texas needs to give some extra NIL money to Ryan Niblett, the kick returner, who has helped them out dramatically in a couple of games this year, because there's some other parts of that team that have not been very good.
All right, inside the top 10 as well. I think that's that almost confirms if they win out, they're going to be in the playoff. I think we kind of assume that certainly coming into today, just kind of based again back to that eye test based on beating that USC team that is also a top 25 win according to the committee. But I think having them number 10 in those initial rankings, especially having to play Pitt in a week and a half, that is another thing for the Irish that they feel pretty comfortable. I think at this point, even though they might not get a home game like they did last year.
I completely disagree with them being number 10, but it is a good position for them. If you're a Notre Dame fan, you're happy. I don't think they have earned that spot. Lost to Miami now. Miami has lost 2 games. Lost A&M. Hey, A&M's undefeated, looking great. That was a home loss. Their only good victory is USC at this point. They lost to the last place teams in the Big Ten, the ACC, and the SEC. I'm sorry, they beat those teams. So there's not a lot in terms of quality wins for Notre Dame other than USC.
Yeah, I mean, and I think seeing Oregon there at number 9 as well, I think that almost reconfirms that this is maybe more of an eye test committee than anything, in terms of, usually they kind of almost overvalue. All right, who have you beaten? What are your top 25 wins? That was always the metric the committee chair would constantly reference. But this seems like more of a bit of an eye test one. And I think that might be, contributing to why Miami was a little bit lower, given what we've seen out of the Canes these last couple of weeks, especially since they kind of came off that bye from the Florida State game. They have not looked the same really since then. And so I think that's kind of maybe contributing a little bit into some of these teams kind of getting away from where we kind of saw them in the polls these last couple of weeks for sure.
Yeah. Well, when we get through this, we're going to have a couple discussion points here. That's for sure. Yeah,
be sure to go ahead and leave your questions in the comments there, and we will try to answer as many as we can for sure. We will have no shortage of questions, I think, to answer as we keep going here with this top 25.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now we should get to the Big 12 teams, right? BYU, Texas Tech.
Yeah, BYU going to be ahead of Texas Tech based on that. So a top 8 matchup there in Lubbock this weekend.
All right,
Number 7 is BYU. So, I think that's notable because you look at especially the non-conference. Neither BYU or Texas Tech did anything in the non-conference, and so I think this is obviously more of a respect kind of being shown towards the Big 12. We saw where Utah was ranked. That's a common win for both of those teams. So. I think it's pretty clear right now. If you talk about takeaways out of these selection committee rankings, it's pretty clear that the Big 12 is probably the big winner tonight over the ACC for sure.
Yeah, and now the SEC is going to get 4 of the top 6. We'll just see in which order. Here we go. Ole Miss at 6. All right. I figured they would be behind Georgia because Georgia beat them head-to-head, and Georgia will be behind Alabama, I would presume.
Well, I think there could be a question mark in terms of whether Alabama actually could be ahead of Texas A&M.
I just can't get there.
But we'll see. I think that might be something out there that eventually comes to pass. But, for Alabama, in terms of the number of top 25 wins, which they're number 4, I'm guessing the Aggies are number 3. So that's a moot point. But if you said who has more valuable wins, which is always a metric the committee has used in the past, that would have been Texas A&M, or would have been Alabama over A&M.
Okay. 5 Georgia, 4 Alabama, and 3 A&M. The 4 in a row for the SEC there, and then numbers 11 and 12 and 16 and 22 and 25. Holy moly, that's a lot of SEC.
And keep in mind that a lot of these teams still have to play each other, so there will be some knocking of these teams out. What a remarkable rise too for some of these teams. I mean, look at Vanderbilt out there. Being in these rankings and seeing their name appear as a possible contender for the playoff.
Indiana number 2.
So, these are not your father's top 25 rankings by any means.
Indiana 2 and Ohio State 1. So there had been some people that thought maybe Indiana should be ahead. Instead, it's Ohio State. That's the way I would certainly have the top 3. After that, it gets a little squishy. But the committee, other than, my big takeaways, Brian, ACC definitely disrespected. Big 12 got priority positioning over them. Notre Dame is too high. And the lack of an American Conference team in there, I think, is a mistake.
Yeah, I would have expected to maybe see USF and or Memphis, maybe just right there at the bottom. And truthfully, the way they debate these teams, it's possible that could have been team number 26 and number 27. It could have been that close in the eyes of the committee. So probably not worried about it if you're the American commissioner. I think if anything, it probably gives you hope if you're out there and you're San Diego State or you're James Madison, because you say, all right, they didn't value them enough to include them in that initial top 25. So I think maybe more than anything, that probably gives everybody outside of the American a little bit of hope down the stretch here in November.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, if you're the Mountain West eventual champion, or if you're James Madison from the Sun Belt, that's 7-1 with a lone loss to Louisville. And I went to that game. It was a pretty competitive game. Yes, you got to feel like you've got a chance in this thing. I want to remind viewers, listeners, that we're taking questions. If you got some, drop them in at us on Twitter, YouTube, on the live link here, wherever. We will take them and respond to them. So let us know what's on your mind. I want to go back here. So obviously, yes, the Texas Tech BYU thing's going to clarify itself for the committee Saturday, right, in Lubbock. Those two are going to play each other head to head. We'll see then, obviously, clearly one of them gets the higher positioning over the other. They could still end up playing again in the Big 12 championship game.
Yep. And it wouldn't be crazy to think with Texas there and Oklahoma bunched together at 11 and 12, that maybe if BYU, if they suffer their first loss, maybe it's a close game. They're on the road in Lubbock. You could maybe even see BYU remaining in the top 10. I would say that's a possibility, especially given where they have Utah at number 13 there, which is right behind Texas and Oklahoma. So that could be a notable addition for the Big 12 as well, which would kind of keep them in the running at least to place two teams, no matter what ends up happening in that championship race to get to Arlington there.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, there's still obviously, I think, given the way that league has been last year and this year, there's some more tumult to happen there before we get to an Arlington pairing, and then we see where the rest of the league stands. For the ACC, we talked about it, but 14 Virginia, 15 Louisville, 17 Georgia Tech, 18 Miami. Yikes. Some factors that maybe went into that. I mean, Virginia has been a pretty lucky team this year. They've pulled a lot of games out, but they did beat Louisville in Louisville, and Louisville did beat Miami in Miami. So we've seen they've at least stratified that way, but they don't seem to really be believers in any of them. Georgia Tech has pulled some games out. They're hurt by the fact that Clemson is bad. I think that you lose any quality there. Miami loses quality from Florida State. It's ironic to me that the two schools that basically said we're better than anybody else in the ACC and demanded unequal revenue sharing and unequal and greater revenue for TV ratings, A, they're nowhere near the competitive picture here, and B, they're going to play at 6 p.m. on the ACC network Saturday. Yikes.
Which is not a Nielsen rated network either. So they're not even getting credit for playing that game in some of those competition metrics that the ACC is using to dole out some extra cash. So I know it's a rolling thing over a couple of years, but how funny is it that Virginia is up there, that Louisville, that some of these other schools that you wouldn't expect to see up there are the ones that are only contending for that playoff bid and contending in the ACC, but they're the ones that are probably going to be playing on ESPN a little bit more often, playing on ABC a little bit more often, especially, you got the Pitt Notre Dame game in a couple of weeks. That's another ABC game. So, there's going to be a lot of interesting talk there around the ACC, I think, moving forward.
Yeah. And that's, again, Pittsburgh going to be an interesting one to watch. They did get in to the top 25 there at number 24. And so that's a good win for Louisville. Louisville beat them and beat Miami.
And I'd be curious in the room too what the discussion around Pitt is, because I mean they're undefeated since making the quarterback change. Louisville ended up beating with Eli Holstein there at quarterback. So did Virginia. So like that's a bit of a factor too in terms of how do all these teams kind of link up to each other. And I'm sure that was the debate in the committee. Like they do get that granular sometimes with a lot of these teams, but it's going to be fascinating to see because they're going to have a lot more data points here in November, just kind of given some of those crossover games.
Yeah, definitely. And Pittsburgh, I mean, kind of remarkable what they've done to turn things around there. With freshman quarterback, they've got some other players at running back that have stepped up. And, Narduzzi kind of went youth movement after the two losses there. And it's paying off for him as of this point. All right, you mentioned, all right, we've got Texas Tech, BYU. We've got Oregon, Iowa. What else do we have this week that you see as potentially really impacting things? We have A&M at Missouri as well. We'll see if
that's an interesting one. It certainly would have been a little bit more interesting if Bo Prabula would have been playing in that one. Obviously, one of the true freshmen there at Mizzou. So that takes away a little bit from this matchup. And truthfully, if A&M gets that win, you're probably looking at Missouri right now where they're at, maybe getting knocked out at the top 25. And all right, that hurts really the entire SEC because Alabama has a win over Missouri as well. You have that head-to-head.
Vanderbilt has a win over Missouri.
Vanderbilt is another one there. So, it can end up kind of snowballing a little bit. But, the fact of the matter is, I think for a lot of these teams, if you're up there, if you're looking at A&M and you're looking at what some of these other teams have to play, you look at Texas having to go to Georgia in a couple of weeks. You're looking at Texas having to play A&M at home. I think you'd be feeling pretty good. Beyond the two in the Big Ten that we know are almost ticketed at this point to make it to Indianapolis, you probably feel pretty good if you're Texas A&M about your playoff chances this year, given what that schedule is, especially if you get past Mizzou this weekend.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's set up for them. The one thing, my only small knock on Mike Elko is his teams seem like they run out of gas a little bit late in the season. That was the case at Duke a little bit, although there was a Riley Leonard injury one year that probably played into that. But then also last year at A&M, we'll see if they can keep their mojo going and not drop a game they shouldn't drop here that really kind of puts them in any kind of jeopardy. But A&M, the fascinating thing here, A&M Mississippi, and Vanderbilt, all ranked here, have never played in the SEC championship game. And Ole Miss has been in the league, and Vanderbilt, obviously, since they created the championship. Vandy, you never even expected them to even be close. But for Ole Miss to have never made it, and to kind of be sitting there with a shot at it, it's got to be very exciting for them. They just got to make sure they don't lose their coach.
Well, that's the other thing about Lane Kiffin. If you're seeing it, maybe A&M make it to the SEC championship game before your school does. And you've had a couple of great shots these last couple of years, really these last 2 years in particular, not only to make it to Atlanta, but to make it to the playoff. And you've had Missouri has made it to the SEC championship game before. Some of these newcomers, Texas has been in their first year in the league. So like if you're Ole Miss, maybe that is at least in the back of your mind in terms of those discussions with Lane Kiffin saying, you know what, even though we didn't make it to Atlanta this week or this year, we still have the resources for you to keep making that shot and taking that shot to get there. And so that's going to be kind of in the back of a lot of people's minds. And you look at some of these matchups too, based on this committee's top 25, some intriguing matchups in the actual bracket when you actually kind of bracket this top 25 and what that setup looks like.
Yeah. No, it's a lot of interest and intrigue left here. How are you? Are you all right with Ohio State of Indiana, or would you go the other way around?
I'd put Ohio State. Just the dominance that they've displayed would kind of be. I know the wins aren't necessarily there compared to what Indiana has, which is strange to say, but I mean they did go on the road very convincingly, winning at Oregon. That was very impressive. And look, Curt Cignetti's team, they have laid waste to their competition. I mean that Illinois game was a runaway. It's going to be fascinating to see too if he kind of uses this as just a little bit of motivation going into a place in Happy Valley this weekend where they have never won. So you kind of say, hey, you got disrespected. Maybe you got the better resume, and maybe that's a little bit of rat poison for Curt Cignetti, knowing him as a former Nick Saban assistant. But maybe he kind of uses this a little bit as a chip in the shoulder. They don't think you're number one. Go out there and prove it, and let's go run up the score in Penn State.
Sure. No, I would imagine that will be used because they have been incredibly impressive. I mean, I've been to two of their games in person. I was there when they beat Illinois, and that was when I said, holy moly, these guys are really good. And, because Illinois is not a slouch team. And to have just absolutely destroy them, run them off the field 63-10 was an eye-opener. But then to follow it up by going to Oregon and winning by 10 points, few dicey moments, but they clearly should have been on the same field with them. And then the second half, they were the better team. Yeah. No doubt about it. So, and then to win at Iowa, which is a tough place to play, as Oregon's going to find out on Saturday. So what they have done, they have elevated themselves significantly, I think, over the team from last year. They're better on both lines. They're better at quarterback. The receivers are just a year older and more mature. The backs are a year older and more mature. The secondary, very good. So they've kind of put it all together, I think, there. And, I think they and Ohio State both are kind of almost itching to match up with each other in Indy to see who's better, but then both knowing that losing doesn't matter. And, that may affect how they approach it when we get there. But for now, I think both of them are sitting there looking across the state line where they border and saying, I'm better than you. And we'll find out eventually, but not yet.
Yeah, and I think they're probably locked into, quarterfinal berths and getting that first round bye as well. When you kind of look at the separation, especially from the metrics and the resumes between those teams and kind of those other contenders, you probably can almost pencil in where they're going to be no matter what going into that. The winner gets the Rose Bowl and the losers going to the Cotton Bowl, and you can kind of pencil that in. No matter what happens there in Indianapolis for the Big Ten title game. But Pat, let's go to the comments and let's start answering a few comments. Certainly as Mac Rhodes, the committee chair, is trying to muddle his way through some of these answers that he gets tossed from Reese Davis there. But let's see. We got Doug asking, what do you make of Miami's fall? And certainly these last couple of weeks, it's not been pretty for Mario Cristobal's team, especially given the nature of these losses in the fourth quarter, in the second half. Even if you go back to the early games, those first couple ones, they kind of got out early, and then they kind of cruised a little bit, let teams back in the ball game, and they eventually won against Florida State, beat Notre Dame, but it got a little bit dicey there. So what do you make of Miami in this fall, especially in the rankings?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about this a little bit in the 40-yard dash this week, that Cristobal is another one that hasn't finished seasons very well. Started very well several times, go to Oregon, but especially here at Miami. And then mid to late season, they start finding losses. And it's curious. Carson Beck thrown, 6 interceptions, I believe, in their 2 losses. Just guy that, and this goes back to Georgia, made a lot of mistakes sometimes at the wrong time. The defense that was dominant to start the season, maybe a little bit less so here as things have progressed. So, we got to monitor Miami and Steve, because they got to go to Pittsburgh. They have got to go at Virginia Tech, which probably will not be a problem, but going to be probably cold for both those 2 games. Those are the last 2 games of the season, and we'll see how, if Miami walks into a 35-degree day in Pitt and a 35-degree day in Blacksburg, how they handle it.
Well, we just saw, certainly when they left the Sunshine State for the first time, what happened there at SMU for sure. So,
yeah.
And I think, Miami is by no means out of this playoff chase, but it's clear they're going to need help. It's not just a matter of winning out and going 10-2. They're going to need help. And I think that delta between where Notre Dame is and where Miami is, I think is one of the more notable things in this top 25.
Absolutely. 8 spots difference between them. All right, Emerald Vargo, any chance the SEC may cannibalize itself a la the Big 12 of the last few years and the ACC this year? Or is the eye test so good for them that it wouldn't matter to the committee? I think it's a legitimate question. Good question. There's already been some cannibalization. There's going to be more. A lot of tough games left there. My guess, Brian, I'm interested to hear what you say, is that SEC losses will largely be excused going forward. Unless you're going to lose. You lose to Arkansas, Mississippi State, Kentucky, South Carolina, that may be different. But I think for the most part, if it's ranked teams beating up on ranked teams, you're going to basically get not a full free pass, but you're not going to drop out of contention.
And I'd be curious, just looking at some of the games that are left on the slate. You look at Alabama. All right, what happens if they lose to an LSU? I know the Tigers are not what they used to be in terms of the thinking around this matchup, but that's typically been a pretty contentious game in the past. And look, LSU still has plenty of talent. They got a first-round quarterback. They've got some wide receivers that they played pretty well defensively in a lot of these one-score losses that they've had going into that A&M game that got Brian Kelly fired. But you never know how they're going to play in that one. You got Auburn on the Plains at the end of the year. How would a team treat losing to an interim coach, which Alabama will play a couple now here in the final month of the season. So it's going to be interesting too. Ole Miss, I think they almost want to. I don't want to say they're going to, count things a little bit before they happen, but even if they end up going down the stretch here, just the slate is not that great. Yes, they got to play Florida, but that's going to be at home. We never know in terms of the old Egg Bowl. Anything can happen in that rivalry for sure. So that could be an interesting one. And truthfully, Mississippi State has played a lot better probably than their record would indicate. So I don't know if that would necessarily ding them as much, but I think for the SEC, they are probably sitting pretty, and they almost have to hope, in terms of the Big Ten getting more than 3 teams, they've got to hope that USC takes a stray loss. They got to hope that Washington takes a stray loss, or that, simply Oregon wins out and they don't have to worry about it, because that's probably going to be their biggest path. Or you have Notre Dame lose as well. That could be another way that the SEC gets 5, maybe even more teams than that.
Yeah. There are some teams definitely in there that will need some help. And again, the carnage is going to happen to a degree there, but we'll see how excused that is. Isaac Nally, Notre Dame over Louisville is crap. I agree, Isaac. Frankly, I think I don't understand it. We can discuss this. Louisville has a better record than Notre Dame. Louisville beat Miami. Miami beat Notre Dame. So the head-to-head is in their favor there. As I mentioned earlier, Notre Dame's wins outside of USC. We've got Boise, which is not a vintage Boise team. We've got Arkansas last in the SEC. We have Boston College in a struggle last in the ACC. We've got Purdue last in the Big Ten. They beat NC State. That's not a bad win. But there's just not a lot of meat on the bone, but there are these shiny gold helmets and this NBC contract and this national fan base that seem to provide helium every now and again. And this seems to be one of those cases. Louisville, better record, beat the team head to head that beat Notre Dame. Make it make sense to me, Brian.
Oh, conspiracy, Pat. I love it. And I think that's the thing that, a lot of fans, when they do see some of those brand names ahead of maybe other teams that are having good years that are not the brand names. I mean, you got Virginia as well in the rankings in the top 15. So that's another one that you can maybe say, could they have been higher? Could they have been lower? That sort of thing. I think for Louisville in particular, I think it's interesting because even in those wins, sometimes they have stretches where they do not look impressive.
No
throwing interceptions. The offense looks a little stodgy, and truthfully, they have been dealing with some injuries. Especially at the running back position, they've shuffled those guys in and out. It's not been a clean, I think, season for Louisville. And truthfully, I mean, they probably should have beaten Virginia going back a couple of weeks. That was a game that they had and kind of gave it away. This is a team. I think they should be a little bit higher probably than what the committee ranked them, but at the same time, I can understand the skepticism around Louisville beyond the resume. I think the resume is solid, and I think probably the Cardinals' biggest issue right now is maybe just the tiebreakers in the ACC. If a lot of these teams win out, that could actually be the great scenario. It used to be, hey, maybe it's Miami. If everybody wins out, they miss the ACC title game, they still get into the playoff. That's how the ACC gets 2 bids. Maybe it's Louisville if some of these tiebreakers with Georgia Tech and certainly Duke is even alive as well. Down the road, SMU is alive in the conference race. You obviously have Virginia as well without a conference loss. So maybe the tiebreakers actually end up helping the ACC, and Louisville is going to be one of those key teams, especially given the nexus they are in some of those tiebreakers.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And we will be definitely watching tiebreakers in multiple leagues because there's no way we don't end up having teams somewhere in the top 2 that have the same records. So, Miller Moss has been interesting with Louisville. He sometimes makes great plays and sometimes just makes terrible ones. He's thrown 6 interceptions this year. They've got a big issue going forward with really one of their 2 best players, Isaac Brown, the running back, along with Chris Bell, the receiver, are their 2 best players. And Isaac Brown is injured, and we don't know how long he's going to be out. Probably a hamstring issue. Leads the nation, I believe, in yards per carry at 8.59. He is a home run waiting to happen. He's got some Jeremiah Love in him to that extent. So we'll see, if they can endure and weather some huge injuries. Let's see. Let's do Shane here. 3 Big 12 teams. Shane seems to be amused by that. I guess thinks that's too many. I'm not sure. I do not think it's too many to at least be in the rankings. I have no problem really with that. Utah is a little higher than I would have expected, but Texas Tech and BYU are pretty much where they should be. And they're going to sort that out on the field, and we'll see where things go from there. But Utah's 2 losses are to those 2 teams, Texas Tech and BYU. So, I don't really have any problem with where the Big 12 is situated. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I think if you're Utah, I mean you've been dominant other than those 2 wins, and even in that Texas Tech game, I know the score got a little wonky there in the fourth quarter. Some turnovers, they took it. They scored pretty quickly, but Utah was still in that game well into the fourth quarter, and so it's not a case of where they're truly different. Another close game against BYU on the road down there in Provo at night. As well. So that's a big rivalry game that came to be a close one. So, I think Utah, are they behind those 2 teams not only in the conference standings, but like in terms of, ranking those 2 teams? Absolutely. But, I think it's still a team that is, capable of playing it, as we just saw this past weekend against Cincinnati, playing well on all 3 sides of the ball. And, that they are capable of dominating teams. And so that's the cut line. I think if you're a Big 12 fan, I think the curious thing for you going forward, no Cincinnati in the top 25. You
right.
Have you have Tennessee, you have Washington over them. No TCU, which is another 6-2 team. They're going to play BYU in Provo, I believe, next week. So that's a notable game as well. Cincinnati has BYU in a couple of weeks as well at Nippert. So, I think the interesting thing, if you are a Big 12 fan, as hyped as you are maybe about seeing BYU and Texas Tech up there, the concern might be where are those other teams, where are those other wins going to come from to kind of enhance their resume. And, keep in mind, this also comes into play with either of those two teams in terms of getting a home game. We know how important it will be to get a home game if you're going to have to go to Provo in mid-December when it might be a little bit chilly and a little bit snowy, or going out to Lubbock, where it might be a little windy and cold, and pretty freezing, and maybe there might even be some tortillas thrown for that first round game if you're in Lubbock. So that's the other thing to keep in mind. How much does the committee really value some of these teams? Right now, the Big 12 is kind of in that cut line for, can you host a playoff game in the first round?
Sure. And where you play on December 19th or 20th could definitely matter. I don't think SMU is unthawed yet from their trip to Happy Valley last year. So weather, which I think we're fine seeing weather be a factor in this sport, and it can be when you're playing those first round playoff games for sure. One thing is interesting, Brian, all the talk about record versus strength of schedule, and we want to reward strength of schedule over your win-loss record. Well, the top three teams all have no losses. The next three have one loss. Then you have a no-loss team. Then you have two more one-loss teams. Then you get to a string of two-loss teams. The only teams looking at this who really were penalized via record or not helped by their record are the ACC teams. One lost Virginia, one lost Louisville, one lost Georgia Tech. Everybody else, it's pretty well slotted in there by how many times you've lost. So maybe that was an overblown storyline.
Well, and those other losses are all to ACC teams as well. Virginia's was a non-conference game, but it was to NC State, which beat Georgia Tech, which obviously, and Louisville's lone loss is to Virginia. So, I think that's the big takeaway. The ACC is in trouble from this set of rankings. In terms of what's the snap judgment, the ACC is not valued right now. And you thought early on they had some of those big non-conference wins. You kind of thought maybe they're turning the corner. Well, by this time, as we've reached these first set of rankings, that does not the case on the field, but it seems like the committee has not bought into kind of the strength of the ACC in general.
Yeah, no doubt. Look, they took a lot of losses early on. As we mentioned, the Big 12 cleaned their clocks in head-to-head, and they just didn't put enough skins on the wall. Miami beating Notre Dame was kind of it. There just wasn't a lot else there. And so you're paying the piper now for that. And I don't know what there is to do much about that. The Big 10, similar situation, not very many good non-conference wins, but when you have two really powerful undefeated teams, you're sitting probably where you should. And then Oregon is sitting where it is. And then the Oregon-Iowa game, if Iowa wins that could really change those two. I think Iowa's at 20, Oregon's at 9. You could almost see them flip or something close to that. I think if Iowa can win, but we're a long way from that happening. So just interesting, though, that, after all of the talk of, we don't want you to just look at win-loss records, they kind of looked at win-loss records. So fascinating. Well, we're wrapping things up here. Emerald Vargo also says that he's happy. He's ticked off by the YouTube versus ESPN dispute. So am I. So's Brian. We're both YouTube customers, and we're ticked off. We had to find alternate means to even watch the selection show. So that was a lot of fun. But we hope they get that figured out, because I don't think anybody cares who's at fault. Just fix it so people can watch their football on Saturday. It's Tuesday. They've got 4 more days to try to get this thing solved. And actually, there's plenty of weeknight games we'd like to watch as well.
Action has returned. We got the Battle of the Bricks going on right now. We got some interesting midweek game. Even the Friday games, I think these next couple of weeks we'll have some interest. Not only for those that have some interest in the playoff, but for the ACC championship game, that they've got a couple of big Friday night games. So gonna be notable. I think if we can get a deal done in these next couple of days for sure.
Absolutely. Friday night ratings have been really good. I mean, I think we will see more Friday night football as we go along, and more conferences wanting to get in on that, because It's been very popular, probably more popular than anybody expected it to be. All right, hey everybody, thanks for joining us and watching. We will be taping the actual podcast with Gene on Thursday, so we'll have another show out for you, probably late morning, early afternoon on Thursday Eastern time. Check that out then, and a lot of content, obviously, every single day at SI.com. So appreciate you all watching with us. If this went over well and you liked it, let us know. We might do it again. All right, enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody. We'll talk to you later.